healthcare, or at least have an interest in our healthcare. It's a very important aspect of seva. And there's two very important devotees in our Gaudiya Vaishnava line, Murari Gupta and Sri Mukunda. Sri Mukunda was the royal physician of the Nawab Hussain Shah, and he was, of course, the Ayurvedic physician, and he took care of all the royalty. But he was also a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When he was on such a high level of devotion and consciousness that when the Nawab Hussain Shah was being fanned, because royalty would be fanned by chamara whiz or peacock fan. So when he saw the glittering, Jai Gauranitai Haribo. When he saw the peacock feather and the glistening from the peacock feather, he fell down in ecstasy because it reminded him of Krishna. So wherever we go, whatever we do, that as devotees, we're trying to develop a consciousness of our full conscious awareness of Krishna and our service to Krishna. So my service, I did a lot of management for ISKCON over the many years. As Prabhu was saying, for some reason I was always pushed into management. The first temple, actually the first project I was given, I was on the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party with Vishnu John Swami, and when that expanded, I was given the first bus, the first additional bus, and we traveled around with 18 brahmacharis all throughout the United States, doing kirtan and prasadam distribution and book distribution. And then I was moved to the New York Temple on Manhattan, 55th Street, and given that service. And it was quite an endeavor. It was 250 devotees living under the same roof, and getting them to the RT and getting them to do their service. It was quite a challenge, but it was certainly rewarding. Prabhupada came there at that time and blessed us with his presence and his encouragement. And then I was moved to Puerto Rico. I started a temple in Puerto Rico. That's still in existence now, some 40 some odd years later. And that was also an experience. All of the experiences in management in ISKCON have been truly rewarding and truly a test of my faith in Krishna and my determination to serve in that capacity. But in recent years, I think the last management position I held was Radhanath Swami asked me to take over the Bhakti Center. Bhakti Center had gone through some managerial difficulties, and he asked me, and I did that. But prior to that, I had already set on my journey, and my journey was, I felt that, at least me as an individual, I felt the need to introduce people to Krishna consciousness that probably would never come to a temple. They didn't consider themselves Hindus, had no real understanding of what Hinduism is, or neither did they really want to get involved in Hinduism. And I tell you frankly, neither did I when I first became a devotee. It was more my connection with Srila Prabhupada, and not so much a connection with religion, but a connection more with meditation and and the music, the kirtan. And so I decided in 2008 that I would kind of step away from management in ISKCON and just focus on trying to meet people, new people, people that probably were sincere and looking for spirituality, but they had this little bit of a lack of desire to go to a temple and to become part of a formal religion, especially one that was foreign to them. So I thought there was a lot of people like that out there, and I wanted to devise various means by which I could approach them. And I think a lot of devotees have gone through this same kind of contemplation. They called it in the mid-2000s, they called it bridge preaching. And this is where you would come up with a concept that would attract a person and eventually leading them to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So I became involved with the yoga community, and I started going to yoga centers and meeting owners of yoga studios. Get water. And introducing myself as a teacher of the philosophy and psychology of yoga. That was my in, so to speak. So when we moved back, yeah, this is perfect. When we moved back to New Jersey, I went around and I kind of blanketed the yoga studios and wrote letters and started meeting yoga studio owners and started getting, because a lot of the more serious yoga communities knew, well, some were already involved, like the Iyengar people and Ashtanga yoga. They're already involved with some degree of philosophy, yoga philosophy. But other yoga studios were finding out that in order to become anything substantial in the yoga world, they had to include in their training of their yoga teachers the philosophy and psychology of yoga. So, of course, quite naturally, I love the Bhagavad Gita. I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita prior to even becoming a devotee and a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I was an English major, and that's where one of the books that we studied in our epic poetry class was the Bhagavad Gita. And I recognized quickly that book was something different than all the other epic poems like Beowulf and poems like that. And I recognized that there was a very deep, profound philosophy there. So my attachment, my love for Gita was very strong and very deep. So I decided to bill myself to these yoga studio owners as the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita, and I also studied up on the Yoga Sutras, which are two of the main yoga texts that any yogi worth their salt knows about, knows that the Bhagavad Gita is a book about yoga, and the Yoga Sutras, of course, by Patanjali, is also a book of classic yoga. And that's how I got started. And so I developed a sense of finding topics. I felt that it was really important to come up with relevant topics that would capture a person, an intelligent person's interest, and see within that topic where I could infuse Krishna consciousness. So my latest, and we'll discuss, I don't want to get into any lengthy discussion. You guys are probably pretty burnt out with lectures over the course of your which is usually what happens when the last lecture comes up. Everyone has lecture fatigue. So, but I'll tell you about my latest because I'm excited about it. I read and I watch TED Talks, and I go on the YouTube channel, and when I see certain topics of interest, I'll listen to that and see if I can somehow or another connect it to Krishna consciousness. Well, I came upon this one topic that I find is very popular right now, especially in the universities. It's called the science of well-being, or the science of happiness. And one of the main propounders of this trend, this psychological trend, is a professor at Yale University. Her name is Dr. Laurie Santos. And there's a couple of big names in there. And Dr. Laurie Santos, the way she got into it was she's a professor at Yale University in psychology, and she was also tasked with the responsibility of counseling students, because they were finding that a lot of, Yale's a very high pressure, Ivy League school. And they were finding that a lot of students were getting very depressed and having a lot of psychological issues. So they tasked her with counseling the students. And in her counseling, she was very surprised to find out that many of these kids that go to Yale University, as you can imagine, as Princeton and Harvard and some of the other Ivy League schools, they come from, golden spoon in their mouth. They come from very wealthy families. They come from highly educated families. What is the reason that they are depressed? They have really, compared to many other kids throughout the world, they have really nothing to be depressed about. So she was trying to find out why these kids were so depressed. So that began her journey on this topic, the science of happiness. What she wanted to do as an academician, she wanted to find out, what, with research, what were the essential components in what made a person happy. Now, it wasn't like what we say, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. It was like real hard data as to, through various interviews and various means that they have to do research, what are the ingredients that will make a person happy. There's another gentleman named Richard Butner, I believe his name is, and he's a journalist. And so there was this kind of mood was percolating, not only through academia, but anybody who was thoughtful. And he came up with, he went around the world because he heard of these different Shangri-Las, these different places in the world where there was a higher percentage of people living to 100 and beyond. And he eventually coined those areas blue zones. So there was a great parallel between what was going on in terms of research on the components and happiness. And in the blue zone, he targeted certain areas in the world. Sardinia is one area, a particular area in Sardinia. Costa Rica is another area. Okinawa is another area. So he found throughout the world there were several areas in the world which he termed blue zones, and they were living an extraordinarily higher rate to advanced ages. So he did his research. Laurie Santos was doing her research. Dr. Dan Gilbert at Harvard was doing his research. And the biggest one is Dr. Robert Waldinger in the University of Michigan. He inherited a research project that has been going on for 88 years on why a person is becoming happy. So you can imagine there's a lot of so-called objective research that has gone on, giving people an understanding of what are the components of happiness. What ingredients, if you have in your life, that will give you the environment where you can become happy. Now, I thought this was interesting to devotees because we want to be happy, right? Who here wants to go on a picnic and prays that it rains, right? Or who wants to go on a picnic and prays that their food gets overrun by ants? Who wants to go to a movie hoping that they see a real stinker of a movie? No, and everyone's doing things with the motivation of enjoyment, becoming happy. Because our true nature, our quintessential nature of the soul is to experience pleasure, to experience happiness. So I thought, wow, this sounds like a great parallel to what we do in Bhakti Yoga. So I found an article actually it was an interview by Dr. Laurie Santos, who is probably the most popular of all the academicians I just mentioned. And she's a real down-to-earth lady. She uses words like yucky and things like that. She's not pretentious. She's really down to earth, but she's highly educated and she's very astute. And she came up with several tips on what are the components of happiness. I want to read you one thing here that I found, because this gives you a little insight to what we're going to be talking about. It's a story I found. This is a true story. There was a group of 100 people that were attending a seminar on personal development. In the middle of their talk, the speaker stops and decides to run an impromptu group activity. He hands out a balloon to each attendee and tells them to write their name on it. The balloons are then collected and placed in an adjacent room. The speaker then instructs the 100 attendees to enter the room and within 5 short minutes find the balloon with their name on it. Well, all pandemonium breaks loose. 100 people rush into the room. There's 100 balloons floating around, and I got to find my balloon. So everybody's running around looking for their balloon. No one finds their balloon. So then he regroups the group again, and then he gives them a further instruction. And he says, okay, that didn't work out too well. Then he instructs the 100 attendees to enter the room, and within 5 short minutes, find any balloon. Take that balloon out and see what name is on that balloon. And then just stand there with the balloon and call out the name. That happened. Everyone went in, everyone got a balloon, everyone came out, and in a few short minutes, all the balloons were distributed. So here, the moral to this story is that we frantically look for happiness all around us, not knowing where it is. Yet our happiness lies in the happiness of others. By giving them their happiness, you get yours. This is a quintessential point that both the Blue Zone author Butner and Laurie Santos and Dan Gilbert and Robert Waldinger, they've been finding out that happiness is in giving, not so much in receiving. And they did a study at, I think it was Tufts University. They gave people $20 bill, 2 groups. One group was instructed, you spend it on yourself. The other group was instructed, do something nice for somebody else. The group that went out and spent that $20 on themselves, I mean, what kind of gratification can you get? And when they were interviewed, did that really make you feel happy? Not so much. The group that actually gave the $20 or gave something in kind of $20 felt very much satisfied. So this giving rather than receiving, that is our lineage. That is Srila Prabhupada in a nutshell. Can you imagine? I'm 75 years old right now. When Prabhupada left India, how old was he? How old was Prabhupada?
69.
Huh?
69.
69. Now, can you imagine doing what Prabhupada did at 69? It's because of that intense desire to give the very best thing that he had, and that was Krishna. And look at the level of austerity that an older man would go through just to give Krishna consciousness to others. Look at that. The Bowery, the Upper West Side, he had very few possessions, having his typewriter stolen in the Bowery, having to go wade through people who were intoxicated, living with a man who was LSD crazed. Look at all the things that he did, based on the motivation to give, to experience. We can't give something that we don't have, but when you experience Krishna consciousness, then the desire, the motivation to give that, because you feel you cannot give anything higher than that. I know when I am blessed with the opportunity to give someone Krishna consciousness. There's a man who just got initiated 2 weeks ago. He's 78 years old. He was Bhakta Sid, now he's Sri Haridas. I met him at a yoga studio kirtan. And he liked the fact that I only chanted Hare Krishna. And everybody else was chanting to Shiva and to Durga and to Ganesh and to this personality. And he saw that I was fixed on Krishna. So we became friends. I didn't preach to him. We just became friends. And in a very short time, he saw my household, came to my house. We have a nice altar there of Gordon Nitai and Lakshmi Narasimhadev. And he came to our house. We have programs at our house. We do kirtan. And he saw and experienced a lifestyle that was a happy lifestyle. Not artificially, but that we were happy in the practice of Krishna consciousness and in the sharing of that practice. So that had some impact on his life. And immediately he gave up all his bad habits. He was 78 years old, so he was under no illusion that he was going to enjoy his body and his mind much longer. Anyhow, so he was a little bit of a ripe candidate as far as that goes. So he gave up all of his bad habits. He began chanting 16 rounds a day, and he attended 5 or 6 classes a week on Zoom of Srimad Bhagavatam given by various devotees. He would attend. I gave Bhagavad Gita class every Wednesday night. He would attend that religiously. And now he's initiated. And this is just based on the fact that what is being discovered now by hardcore research, the Vaishnavas have, the devotees have. They came, Laurie Santos made a nice little list of tips, happiness tips. And the first thing that she says, and this is consistent with what Richard Butner found in the Blue Zone research, that socialization is very important. And it's so important that out of the 6 or 7 tips that she gave, 3 are in relationship to socialization. One is socialization, the act of getting out and being with people. Dr. Seth Roberts at the University of Berkeley, California, he came up with a theory that we need face. We need to see people's faces. We need to experience body language. We need to see all of these things that can only come from the human energy or the human component live, not on screen. And he said when that happens, it adds some joy, some happiness. So socialization. Dr. Laurie Santos says the same thing. And she says this kind of human interaction. Right now, what do we witness with our kids? They can be sitting together, and then they'll all be on the phone, right? There'll be 10 kids. I used to teach in high school. There could be 10 kids sitting there. They're all on their phone. They're not talking. When I was in high school, I went to high school from 1964 to 1968. We didn't have any of that. We probably talked too much. We talked and associated and went over each other's houses and played sports together. And we did so many things. There was so much socialization going on. There was so much interaction. And now what they're discovering in their research, they're finding that this socialization, or the absence of it, is so beneficial or detrimental, depending. If there's an absence of socialization, then it is detrimental to our well-being. I don't know if there's been any research done, but I bet your bottom dollar, if there's research done on the kids who did school shootings, mass shootings, one of the things I remember very clearly is they kept to themselves. They spent a lot of time in their room, they spent a lot of time on the internet, and they withdrew from society. So we can see what happens, how the lack of socialization, how detrimental it is to our well-being. The infusion of socialization, that we make a conscious effort, and it really means that we have to be conscious, because if we're feeling a little down, and if we consciously invest ourselves in other people, being with other people, serving other people, we find that it has a remarkable effect on us. My wife always tells me, stay home, stay home. I'm always going out, I'm always running out, going to a yoga kirtan, I'm going to this. Why don't you stay home tonight? You're not feeling so well. No, I have to go out. I want to be out. I want to be out with people. I think Krishna's going to send me somebody. And invariably, always, Krishna always sends me somebody. She always teases me wherever I go. I'm talking to people. We just took my son to an audition. He's trying to get into this very good art school in West Palm Beach. So he has to audition. He has to draw still life. He has to complete a picture from some lines. So we're in the cafeteria. The parents aren't allowed to go in there, of course. We have to wait. So we're in the cafeteria. And there's an Indian lady sitting to my right. My wife's busy. She's doing some notes or talking or doing something in regards to her into her work. And I start talking to this Indian lady. She happens to be a doctor. She happens to be very interested in spirituality. And we had a nice conversation. I introduced her to my wife. And she and my wife get along very, very well. And I see another lady sitting there with a boy with a drum. So I go up to that lady and I said, does your boy play the drums? And she says, yes. And the thing I noticed is the spark in their eyes when someone approaches them. Someone gives them recognition. And I said, does your boy play drums? And she said, yes. He just tried out for the orchestra here, because they have dance, they have orchestra, they have painting, visual arts, communications. And then she started getting into the whole thing. I said, yeah, my son wants to play drums. He plays an Indian drum called mridanga, but he wants to play regular drums too. And I said, he plays piano. Oh, she said, and then she pulls out like an xylophone. She said, oh, he plays piano. He could probably play. We get into this whole conversation. The boy comes in, a whole other conversation. A third lady, she's sitting there with her son, and I said, oh, what are you going to try out for? A whole conversation. He's going to be a vocalist because she's in the choir, and she always wanted her son to sing. And we're talking. So just this act of paying attention to people. Because what's going on is people are withdrawing. So this whole act, this is what we as devotees need to do. And Krishna will reveal to us how we can introduce them to Krishna consciousness. So the main ingredient, Lori Santos says, socialization. We need socialization. We need to be social. In the whole principle of our bhakti yoga is sangha, right? There's 5 powerful limbs for bhakti. Who knows what those 5 powerful limbs? There's 64 limbs. The Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he boils it down to 5 powerful limbs of bhakti, that if we practice these every day, we will advance very quickly. Who knows what those are? First, chanting. Chanting is first and foremost, because in the other 4 limbs, chanting is involved. The second one is sangha. Sangha. Rupa Goswami says association with like-minded people or people who are more advanced than you spiritually. Third one, Shastra. Because we need the fortification of knowledge of what we are doing. You can't just be doing things whimsically. That happens a lot in the yoga world. Oh, I'm going to chant to Ganesh. I'm going to chant to the monkey god. I'm going to chant to this god, to that god. Who are they? They don't even know it. One time I was at the yoga kirtan and they were doing Om Namo Shivaya. Right? Om Namo Shivaya. Om Namo Shivaya. So after the kirtan was over, I said, that was a very nice chant. Who's Shiva? And everyone looked at me. There were about 15 people there. No one could tell me who Shiva is. So I told them who Shiva. I gave them the story of Lord Shiva, how he appeared, the whole thing. And they were just like, I didn't know that. And then one time they chanted to Hanuman. So I said, who's Hanuman? Oh, he's a monkey god. I said, he's not a monkey god. He's the opposite of a monkey. He's a devotee. He's not a monkey god. He's a devotee of the Supreme Lord. Ramchandra's best devotee. And then I told him the whole story of Hanuman. I told him the whole story of Ganesh. So you see, Shastra fortifies our knowledge, our faith, our conviction. I always tell the yogis, do you think we're doing yoga just to get a good body? You think that's the whole goal of yoga? No, it's not the whole goal of yoga. That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? When Patanjali gives his Ashtanga, his eightfold ladder of yoga, what does he say? Yamas, niyamas, right? Asana, pranayama. Those are the four kind of external. Yamas and niyamas, how to act within yourself, how to act outside yourself. Pranayama, Lata was giving a nice description of the effects of positive effects of pranayama. Asana, everybody's into asana. Patanjali mentions asana 3 times in the Yoga Sutras. Krishna mentions it, I think, twice in the 6th chapter. Not much emphasis. But now you go to a yoga studio, it's all asana. It's all asana. What about the other 4? Pratyahara, going within. Dharana, concentration. Dhyana, meditation. What to speak of samadhi? What about those? What are those? And that's where the philosophy, knowing what we are doing and how we are doing it. So this socialization means that we can be with people. We don't have to be waving our finger. And you are nonsense. And you, Prabhupada could get away with it. He was an elderly man. He was a scholar. He was a sadhu. He was our grandfather. He could chastise us. But not us. We can't do that. So we have to become friends. We have to attract them to our example and our experience. And we do this through socialization. And we show when we have, what was the whole Sunday love feast about? Prabhupada giving us an opportunity to be with him, to hear him, to see his example, and to see when someone is on a very elevated level of bhakti, how loving they are, how caring they are, how compassionate they are. When we met Prabhupada, never met anybody like that in our lives. I had a good relationship with my family. I come from an Italian family. I had, grandparents and, laughing. There was a lot of laughter in our house and, a lot of joking, etc. So I was very used to socialization on that level. But when I met Prabhupada, it was on that level of personal warmth, love, but it was on the level of, as the Prabhu was saying, Shreyas and Preyas, right? It was on the level not of just our body, just the immediate gratification that comes from social interaction, but Shreyas. Prabhupada was giving us the gratification of social interaction. We were having fun in Kirtan. We were getting intoxicated on prasadam. All of these things, all of the beauty of bhakti, all of these things we were experiencing. Because bhakti is experiential. It's an experience. It's intuitive. Yes, it's contemplative, and yes, there's gyan there. But it is really, what is the icing on the cake of bhakti is the experience of it. When you chant Hare Krishna in the association of devotees, when you take prasadam. I remember the first time I took prasadam, I was a macrobiotic. And that was the trend at that time. No sugar, no dairy. I was just eating very, very basic grains and, very basic. And finally, Krishna allowed me to go to the temple in New York City, and I went to the temple, and I had my first gulab jamun. Someone not eating sugar, right? They gave me a cup with liquid in it. I didn't know what the liquid was, and this gulab jamun. And I said, what is this? They said, oh, you'll like it. It's called ISKCON Bullet. I said, okay, that's intriguing. And I took it, and it was all sugar, and I was like, wow. I hadn't had sugar in so long, but it was so delicious. And the next time I went, they gave me blueberry halava and kheer. And that was it. I knew I'm not leaving this place. I'm not going anywhere. I mean, I was used to good, Italian food is rated the #1 food in the world. So I was used to good cooking. But I had that halava and that kheer, sweet rice. And I said, oh, I'm not going any place. I've got to be around it. So all of these kinds of social interactions speak louder than words and judgmentalism. It attracts people to you, and they want to be with you. They want to hang out with you. They want to chant with you. They want to hear what you have to say. So socialization, being social, and you know what? Another thing. So those two. The third one is recommended. You know what the third one is? Call a friend. All within the keeping of personal interaction, showing people you care. My wife can testify. We planned a trip to the UK in end of May. We went, and I told her, I said, you know, I have this friend. When I worked in New York City, I worked in the music business, and I made a lot of friends in the UK. I said, I have this friend. I used to preach to her all the time. What's her name? Lindy. Yeah. I said, I haven't seen her in 35, 40 years. I said, I wonder if I still have her number. So she said, go ahead, check. So I found, the days pre-cell phone, you kept a black book, a little address book. I found like a 50-year-old address book. Somehow or another, I had the sense to keep it, that there were going to be numbers in there. So her number was in there. And I couldn't figure out the country code, the area codes there. So we have a friend there. She grew up coming to the temple when I was temple president, and now she's a grown woman with her own children. She married a gentleman from the UK. So I called her up. I said, could you try this number for me? I can't figure it out. So she did, and she got the lady. And the lady said, well, I would love to speak to him. And I called her up. She said, you've been gone for 100 years. What happened to you? So we went to the UK, and we met with her. And we had a wonderful time. In fact, our trip to the UK is a reinforcement of this socialization principle. Because for me, and my wife and I disagree a little bit, but for me, the UK trip was all about people. We got to see Sham Kumari, the girl that grew up coming to the temple. We got to see Lindy, my old friend from 35, 40 years back. And we got to meet a god brother of mine I always wanted to meet. He's an author. He's a very deep thinker. I never met him, but I wanted to meet him. And we spent 3 wonderful days at their house in Glastonbury. It was all about meeting people based on call a friend. Just call a friend. So all of these things, we may do it to some degree. One of the things that Laurie Santos recommends very highly is you may do it to some degree, but always try to increase and improve it. Because we as devotees have a lot to offer. People are looking for answers. It's a very chaotic and confused world out there nowadays, and it's not getting any better. And people are looking, they are searching, and you'll be surprised if you just put yourself out there, if you just increase your presence, being amongst people, you'll see that just by them meeting you, they'll be attracted and it'll give you some opportunity. And you know, so 3 involves socialization, tips that she gives. 4th one is meditation. They are finding that people who incorporate meditation into their life are more peaceful and happier people. There's 2 types of meditation. One is called focused attention meditation, and the other one's called mindfulness meditation. Focused attention meditation is when you, like mantra meditation, for instance, you focus your mind on a mantra and you chant repeatedly. Mindfulness is being in the moment, practicing being in the moment. And we do both. In our chanting of japa, right, we have focused attention. We're focused on the holy name. When Prabhupada was asked, what do I think of? You know, in terms of my japa. Just think of the holy name. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Just think of the Hare Krishna mantra. So we do that meditation. So people are now more open. My wife, when she counsels people in her medical practice, that she recommends to people, you know, when they're, especially when they're anxious, she says, have you tried meditation? And they said, what? You know, no, meditation. And then she finds out what religion, what culture they're coming from, and she makes a recommendation, do some meditation. So these things, I just wanted to give you in brief the basic tenets of what researchers are now finding out to be universal components and what makes people happy, and in what we have matches perfectly in what they're finding. The chanting, the socialization, the sangha, all of these different components that they have. Lifestyle, diet, all the things that we are incorporating in our bhakti yoga. That's what they are finding. So we are proof, living proof. Thank you very much. I'll stop right there. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for